Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback and enjoy the story. Our main protagonist woke up, but of course he couldn't figure out where he was. The first thing he noticed was a mirror, as well as the sound of running streams and birdsong. He looked in the mirror that he found next to him and realized that it was none other than him. Of course, he couldn't figure out what was wrong with his face. He thought he looked incredibly. He decided to open the status window, where he noticed that his race indicated that he was a goblin. He just went and reborn into it. Of course, we understand that Border of Fantasy is a popular latest game with high ratings. People loved it for its incredible graphics and incredible plot. This RPG became incredibly viral and incredibly popular due to the ratings. And our protagonist couldn't get past it, and it completely sucked him in. Yesterday, he just finished off a goblin and raised his level, then fell asleep. But why did he turn into a goblin out of all the possible options? Although it looks like a human, it is a goblin race. At that moment, his system announced that the person's memories were merging with the game character. Nothing could ever make our protagonist understand until a lot of goblin memories started seeping into his brain. He realized that the guy whose body he had adopted wasn't exactly living the sweetest life based on what he saw. But it was at this moment that the same girl from the memories came in, so our hero asked to wait for him a little. The girl at the same time came out of our protagonist on the street and said that now and today to cook your brother a delicious lunch. Our hero at that moment understood that he was in the game, Border of Fantasy. Because all the landscapes were familiar, the setting, the world around him, and based on his memories, he understood that he and his sister lost their parents very early, under the patronage of a black market merchant who uses them as hired labor. My sister almost fell while walking, so our hero had to help her. We found out that our protagonist's little sister's name is Lily, and she was very happy that she had such a caring brother, because she can only rely on him. Of course, our protagonist wanted to protect his little sister, but he understood that the goblin race is the strongest race of all possible, and he was reborn there, so what should he do now? At the same time, we are transported to the black market merchant's mansion. Basically, he does all the errands since his sister is blind, but still she does some housework. As soon as they arrived at the merchant's house, they were immediately ordered to find the black ore. As soon as our hero went in search of this ore and scored the right amount, many mocked him. They laughed because he was a goblin. They understood that, of course, their situation is much better than that of our hero. However, as soon as they finished laughing, they noticed that our protagonist wasn't finished with his work yet. They even thought that he wouldn't be able to pass it in time. Of course, our hero understood once again that being reborn as a goblin was the best thing that could be done. As soon as he was done, he went to another place. He realized that according to the map from the mansion, 125 years had passed since the main events in the game. His age matched the character, but why a goblin at all? As soon as he finished pondering this, many knights began to appear above him. Our hero could not understand where they even came from. However, then I remembered that there was also a certain squad called Holy Knights in the game. At this moment, he realized that they were all in the depths of the continent right now. But did the human dominance increase so much during this time? After all, if so, then this is very different from the game. He realized that if this was the case, then he needed to run home to his sister as soon as possible. As soon as he ran into the house, he asked her to calm down and then completely stay in place. As soon as he ran to her, many other residents of the house began to run out, so our protagonist just did not have time. The monster already went through the door. Our hero told Lily to run, because of course he will not be able to defeat the monster. The monster struck its blow at our main character, so that he fell into a kind of sleep. He couldn't understand if he was going to die so easily. Even though he was reborn, he couldn't do anything. He couldn't protect either himself or his sister. So at the same time, a voice said that it would give him some of its own power. The system has informed our protagonist that he now knows all kinds of magic. The level, as well as the strength of our main character, increased. But the voice continued. He said that our goblin will not be able to use all his powers at once, but gradually he will master everything. The voice said that as soon as all the powers were transferred, he would die. Our main character wanted to talk and ask a lot of questions, but the voice said that they didn't have much time anyway. He said that it was time to kill everyone. We are again transported to the real world, where the monster wanted to kill Lily. But our protagonist appeared, who was alive. He decided to use the dark magic demonic leap. His body gained incredible speed, so much so that the old man couldn't believe his eyes, so that he was instantly struck down from behind. Lily couldn't understand what was going on, but all the residents couldn't believe that the invaders were already gone. By this point, our main character began to receive notifications that the process of reincarnation has begun, as well as the study of black magic. As soon as he read this, his head started to split apart again, and he knew it would happen every time. At the same time, the same boy named Butch told his father that he had mastered the monster, because he had not trained magic for nothing. The whole crowd was trying to tell him he was incredible, so Butch said it wasn't free. Our protagonist realized that he wants money and fame. Butch noticed them and started laughing again, but our character just said that it wasn't him who defeated those people. But if he was telling the truth, then let him defeat the goblin in a duel in front of everyone. They tried to stop Butch, but at the same time he threw his spell at our main protagonist. He thought that the goblin had already reformed, but at the same time, a certain entity began to approach Butch. Butch was scared, so this entity forced him to confess everything. This magic was called illusion, which our main character knew well. It was at this point that the goblin walked away with his sister, leaving people to speculate about the occasion. Of course, our goblin understood that he was reborn the first time as the weakest, but the next time he became the strongest. It is with this power that he can protect everyone. In front of us is a ruined building where a brother and sister are sitting. Lily noticed that her brother is acting a little strange, but our hero only asked him to turn his head and activated healing magic on it. All he could think of right now was that his sister had been blind from the start, so he decided to try a case and cure her of it. It was then that she realized that she could now see. Our hero told her that now he can use dark magic. Lily couldn't believe it. How did it even happen? But our hero only said that it came out on its own. Lily was still shocked, but our protagonist told her not to worry because she could see him now. Lily realized that there was no point in finding fault with anything. She just cried and thanked her brother again. Most likely, at this moment, the conditions of the god or that voice were also fulfilled. So at the same time, a certain fairy appeared, a goblin fairy, which not only our character could see but also Lily. She said that she was assigned a mission to guide them to a hidden goblin village. Of course, these words about the hidden village made them worry, but they still decided to follow her. So in a moment, they were already on the magic continent, an uninhabited area. Of course, our hero understood that the border of fantasy, this is a game with an open and vast world. And because of the developed game system, you could meet many creatures. Our main protagonist was staring at the fairy, which annoyed him a little. A few seconds later, they arrived at the village. Of course, our hero did not know about this village, and the fairy laughed at him, because it was clear that he did not know anything, because it was cursed. After a few seconds, Feya said that he would show him to the prefect. As soon as our children began to lead their way to the headman, many people looked around at them. Many children started coming to spend the night with Lily, and the fairy said that she didn't have to be with them for meetings. Our protagonist allowed his sister to play with the children, because he also understood that she wanted to have a little fun. As soon as our character entered the house of the headman, he said that he knew that this meeting would happen because the prophet foretold it to them. As soon as he was supposed to come, he was supposed to hand him a certain treasure. The headman moved away, and the fairy said that the inhabitants of this village, and the headman himself, was very open to them. But they lived far away from everyone, which means they were weak. Everyone considered goblins to be the weakest, just a resource. Of course, our protagonist knew that this was true, because in the game, goblins were the weakest opponent. But he did not even think that he would find himself in such a situation, because all the time he killed them indiscriminately. As soon as the headman arrived, he gave a certain scroll to our character, saying that if they had a strong leader, they would definitely survive in the future. Our hero noticed that small goblins were watching him through the window, who also noticed that they were being seen. They came closer to our character and said that they were asking him very much to save the village. Residents also did not stand aside. They all one by one began to enter the house, fall to their knees, and ask for salvation. It wasn't long before our character decided to think things over while standing in the forest with Lily. He couldn't understand why the goblins had brought themselves to such a state. Why did people start interfering in their lives in such a way? While he was thinking, the fairy asked him what he was going to do. But our protagonist only replied that he wanted to look at the skills that he had already unlocked. Of course, they were all low level. He knew that there was no skill tree in this world, but his stats were quite high, so he decided to test his physical strength first, and then his magic strength. With a single blow, a huge rock was destroyed, and the one next to it was destroyed by dark magic. Lily loved the sight, and the fairy fainted. He knew that after this point, once he tried out all the skills, it would be much easier, so now he had to finish the last thing. He remembered that in the scroll that the headman had given him, There was a map with a specific location in the hidden village. He went to it and got to a certain memorial, on the site of which our protagonist is obliged to cast a spell, Goblin Kinship. At the same time, certain outlines of absolutely all kinds of goblins appeared. Our hero knew that in several thousand years, goblins are born with incredible strength. These are mutants among goblins. These souls will serve our main character, so to bring peace to these lands, he will be the one who will bring peace to the goblin family. At the same moment, we see that the voice calls our hero again. He asked him to wake up several times, which even had to raise his voice a little. Some kind of beauty appeared in front of our protagonist, and not just a voice. The woman replied that she was a Goblin Goddess. Our character realized that he had seen a mural in the prefect's house, which depicted exactly the same woman. He started to stare at her, which made her angry. She said that there was no time for unnecessary conversations. So she said that on the day they met, she didn't have much time to clarify the situation. So she decided to tell him why she decided to reward him with a part of her power. Of course, our main character understood that the passage of the game could not count how many goblins you killed, because this race was expelled because of impotence, but they can become the strongest. The goddess said that our protagonist had already taken over all the strength from the fallen brothers. Dozens of the strongest united into one whole body. This is exactly the strength of the goblins. The goddess said that goblins always try to protect everything that is dear to them, but in the future they will inevitably die. Only our protagonist can change everything. As soon as she said those words, our main character's eyes were opened at the same time. He knew it was his turn now to change the story. He even decided to write a letter for admission to the Magic Academy through the Dark Magic exam a little later. The fairy was worried, but our goblin said that everything would be fine, because for his goal he would need to defeat one creature, King Dior, who lives in his academy. And if our main character becomes an outstanding student, he will definitely defeat the king. Of course, for this purpose, our main character decided to leave his sister in the village, and then went on the road with the fairy. Sure enough, within a few hours, our protagonists had already arrived at the territory of the Diora kingdom. They had just arrived in the city, but they had already noticed that someone was being The fairy noticed that that person is a low-ranked demon, but still bullies the weak. Our character understood that this was the slave trader Bradley. Such a person was in the game, so our hero considered this meeting as pure luck. Our goblin asked the fairy to follow the girl. As Sama retreated to an alley where he began to use his magic, he summoned a goblin priestess. She was very happy to visit this world again, so she asked why she was summoned. The fairy was shocked with levity, but our protagonist didn't let her say a word, so he just asked for one favor. Bradley was still beating up the girl, so our main character came up and asked me to give her to him, but Bradley just let out a sigh and said that he wouldn't do anything like that. Our protagonist just smiled and said that he would buy this girl for the price of 100 times more. Bradley was shocked, but at the same time, the magic fairy started throwing money at Bradley, after which Bradley quickly packed up his bags and drove away. The girl, in turn, could not understand why she was saved. But to this, our goblin replied that she was just like her A-goblin. However, our main protagonist only replied that everything was fine. In fact, he even turned an improbable plan to save this girl, because from the very beginning of the start of the game, he knew that Bradley kept all his money in his safe in the cart. So a priestess who has the right skills sneaked in and took all the money. By that time, the goblin priestess was already pleased with herself, because she understood that our main character was flattering her. As soon as the little girl got up, our protagonist asked the fairy to take her to the village, but our character will go to the village, because from this moment a new story will be written, where the exam will begin. Only the children of aristocrats can enter this elite school in front of him, but anyone can also take part in the exam, which means that if you have the ability, then you will definitely be accepted. Despite the race of our main character, they will not be able to ignore him because of his abilities. He believed that if he became the best student, he would overthrow the 7 kings with his own hands. As soon as he thought about it, he was already asking people to queue up for the exam. While he was waiting in line, someone tapped him on the back. It was a certain girl who was begging for some sweet food. Our main protagonist started looking in his pockets for something and found the chocolate that his sister made for him. He didn't have time to do anything, because the girl already grabbed the bag and ate it. She said that she feels better now, but our character was not very bad. He just breathed aggression. The girl apologized because she noticed that he was not very happy about this. She even thought that he would not calm down now. She took a stance and said that she would definitely return the favor to him in the future. She introduced herself as Letty, but only at this moment our main character noticed that he did not have a name. The girl said she could think of a name for him. She even suggested the name Lime. Letty said it was a perfect name for him because of his appearance, so at the same time he said it was really nice to meet her. While they were getting acquainted, everyone was warned that the exam was already starting. While both of our protagonists passed by people, many were very unhappy with them. Things started happening at the Central Magic Academy. The instructors were constantly taking notes, watching, observing, so in a moment it was Letty's turn to shoot down her target flawlessly. Right now, according to other participants, we realize that this is the Dark Elf Princess herself. Of course, Lime couldn't imagine the princess standing in front of her because she definitely doesn't behave like that. He thought that he should talk to her formally, but then abruptly changed his mind. He began to support her, saying that she would definitely pass the exam. However, just as he said that, the same boy from the entrance who was a vampire named Haig came over. He said that some non-entity didn't dare to praise the princess, and as a servant of an acquaintance of his left in such an academy, did he think that he would actually be able to pass the test? Everyone started laughing, but Letty stood up for our main character. She even shouted that our protagonist is much stronger than the vampire. Haig couldn't believe that Letty was so protective of her new boyfriend. But Lime had no choice but to stand by and tell Letty that everything was fine. He looked at the target in front of him and realized that if he was more serious, he would just blow the Academy's playground off the face of the earth. Even though he wanted to test his strength to the max, it was best not to draw attention to himself in the first place. Time was running out, and all the examiners were telling him to hurry, so the only thing Lime did was use a small part of his power. The incredible charge just took down half of the site. Everyone was in shock, and our main character realized that he had overdone it a little. Letty was jumping up and down in delight, so that let him know that everything was fine. They didn't have much time after the written exam, so Lime noticed that Letty was very worried. The princess in turn said that the tests for her have always been a complete torture, so now she is worried. Of course, our character was also a little worried, even though the tests included components of the game that he played for days, so he doesn't even doubt that he passed the test. While our heroes were waiting for the end of the break, they were approached by Haig, who expressed his dissatisfaction with Lime. Of course, our character knew what to say to Tom, so the vampire was about to draw his sword to call a duel. But the notification asked everyone to go to the battle platform, because they will have a battle test. As soon as everyone gathered, the examiner said that before everyone fought against each other, but now everyone will fight against one goal. Everyone will have to stand up against the Thunder Dragon, which immediately appeared. Everyone was shocked because the Thunder Dragon appears only at the end of the game and does not even live in that area. Does the school want applicants to have to beat it? Time after time, the dragon continued to intimidate the students. Many did not know how to defeat it. Everyone ran from it, but not just one person, just not Letty, who on the contrary ran at it. Lime was afraid for her, but Letty screamed that she had to pass this exam for the sake of her own kingdom. She shackled the dragon and then tried to shoot him with a bow, but the dragon quickly dispelled all the effects and headed for the princess. Letty thought that she was going to die, but she noticed that nothing happened. Our main character appeared in front of her, who blocked the dragon's blow. He even said that he would deal with the dragon incredibly fast. The dragon was angry. He wanted to use all his strength. So in a second, there was an incredible explosion, which of course did not hit our heroes because they just flew into the air. Our Lime said he didn't have much time, so he threw the princess out of his hands. I thought about it. That would crash, but somehow landed on a goblin slime race that died out 100,000 years ago due to a drought. The dragon was looking at our protagonist with an incredibly challenging look. So, at the same time, our main character started to fight against him. He started dodging each charge of the dragon, and then completely kicked him into the wall. This was his plan. Just take and stick him as far away as possible from all the students. The dragon was incredibly angry about this act, so after a second, thunderclouds appeared in the sky. Our hero expected this, so he retreated a little to Haiga, from whom he took his sword. Used elemental coating. Our main protagonist just ascended to the sky and charged his sword with lightning. Having aimed his sword at the dragon, he simply took and fired a charge of incredible power at the dragon. He was pinned to the ground so that the third part of the conditions was fulfilled. New spells were available to our Lime again, and for killing the dragon, he received a sword called Mjolnir. Of course, the instructor had never met such people in his life. He wanted to report this to the director, but everyone was shocked, except of course our hero. A couple of hours later, the results were announced, where our candidates for admission were Lime and Letty. Letty thought it would pass, but our hero said that she was the only one who threw herself at the dragon. They continued to look at the scoreboard with the results, after which Letty decided to fix something there. She changed the name of our hero from No Name to Lime. A short time later, they were given robes as well as school uniforms, they were even told. What they found in the dorm at the moment. But still, before joining, they will need to pass the selection test for a place in the dorm. Of course, Lime didn't like the fact that there were so many tests, but it couldn't even be helped. And the man said that their dorm was divided according to the level of magic contained in the body. After a few seconds, a certain car arrived with an object that was hidden from all eyes. Many students began to discuss those who passed the test, or rather, our protagonists. They knew that the test was very difficult this year, and they only passed 2 of them. Letty wanted to shout at them that they didn't understand, but Lime just told her to calm down because it didn't matter now. Letty couldn't understand why our character was being so kind to them. But he was already interested in the test, to which the man said that everything would be very simple. They would have to stand in front of the device, and that in turn would automatically analyze the amount of dark magic in their body. You just need to touch it with your hand. The man was very happy that they had such an incredible device of the latest model. It was simply impossible to deceive him. First there was Letty, whose results simply amazed the instructor. Of course, Lime understood that this was expected of a dark elf princess who had a huge potential. So if she continued to develop her abilities, she would become a great warrior in the future. And it was at this moment that the system said that she would be enrolled in the dormitory called Lucifer, where the strongest magicians of academia live. Everyone assumed that it was because she was a princess of the rare dark elf race, so that's why the academy enrolled her in this dorm. Of course, our Lime also came to the table as soon as he was asked. He himself was interested in how strong he became, but only the device did one thing: it just broke. The teacher was shocked by this because this device cost as much as 500 coins. Our character replied that there was nothing he could do about it. Of course, the inspector was not happy with this, because the device worked up to this point just fine. Our character didn't want this, so the examiner just gave him a penalty, saying that he would be assigned to the worst dorm of all. Of course, Lime didn't like this information, because if they put him in a better dorm, then there was no way he could meet the headmaster. So he would have to think of another way to meet him because the magic dorm is of the lowest rank. Sir, it was just awful. As soon as he got into it, he started thinking about what he needed to achieve while he was living in the academy. Of course, the main goal was to become the best student of the academy and thus meet the headmaster, kill him, and seize all the territories belonging to him. However, due to his own mistake, he is now where he is now. What was he supposed to do now, if there was a possibility of transferring to Letty's Lucifer dorm in the future? So at the same time, he looked at his textbook and realized that he had a plan. He realized that the Academy Magic Tournament was a tournament that was held once a year to determine the strongest mage among the Academy's students. This tournament is a century-old tradition of the Academy, and absolutely anyone can participate in it, and the winner receives a prize personally prepared by the director. So simply put, the prize itself will be awarded by the director. This will be a great chance to meet him. The girl said that Torino is very dangerous with magic, but Lime was aware of all the conditions. He just asked to sign him up for the tournament. As soon as he tried to sign something, the girl called the inspector, saying that a freshman showed up to her. The examiner immediately asked, "Is it really the one who broke the barrier?" However, at the same time, the examiner said that if it was him, then there was no need to cancel his application, because even the examiner would be interested in watching this show. The application was accepted, so the girl once again reminded that it is she who does not bear any responsibility. Lime knew that, and also that this was a chance to cling to, and he knew that he would soon meet King Dior. At the same time, all the actions were taking place in the top-ranked magic academy called Lucifer, in the female half. While half the girls were still showering, Letty was there too, and she was glad to have met such a wonderful goblin as Lime, and she even realized that he had saved her life like a prince. She started thinking to get the thoughts out of her head, because what was she even thinking? But still, she couldn't help it, because she saw something majestic in his figure, as if she couldn't take her eyes off him. Why was her heart beating so fast just thinking about him? At the same time, our main protagonist pretended to be asleep, but as soon as night fell, he immediately went outside and called the goblin priestess. He said that he would need her help, but when he turned around, he noticed that for some reason she was dressed up, just like a schoolgirl. Of course, the only task for the priestess was to explore the entire school with her abilities. However, as soon as he finished, a fairy appeared. She reported that she had already delivered that little girl. to which our hero expressed his gratitude to her, but asked for forgiveness because he wanted her to draw a map for him. The fairy didn't know the word, so our character explained what it meant for the Academy's terrain map. The fairy agreed to all of this at the same time, so at the same time, their secret mission began. They got close to the tower under the cover of shadow camouflage, where our main character tried to hide his presence, albeit partially. But looking out the window, he noticed that the most important bigwigs of the Council Academy were sitting in the building. Wesker, Mylene, Eddie, Kia. Most likely their conversation was about Lime. Eddie said that you could expect anything from this freshman. He was completely unsuitable for their academy, but many people also supported him, because he was the only one who was able to defeat the Thunder Dragon. They all started to argue, but the teacher continued to insist that their school only accepts nobles. And the new student is only a goblin, a member of the lower race. They simply could not allow him to study in their academy. Everyone was starting to get excited, because the magic tournament was actually starting soon. How could anyone even be allowed to do this? But of course they did, because that was the rule. Was Eddie the only one to worry about order and shock? Of course Lime understood that everyone had the right to enter the academy, but no one was happy to see the goblin. Of course, the old man probably noticed something, so he just said that it was time to go get ready for bed. It didn't seem like the head man. So as soon as he left, the teachers conspired to deal with our protagonist as early as possible. They decided to put him with the dragon lud against which he will gladly fight. One of the female teachers was simply delighted, because she understood that the aristocrat was using all his strength to get rid of some goblin, which only made her laugh. However, the others immediately started arguing again. Lime knew he wasn't going to hear anything else, so he decided to just get out of there. By that time, the same goblin priestess was telling our hero that she had found a secret entrance in the library, and the fairy drew a map at Lime's request. As soon as they looked over, they noticed that one guy with ears was still practicing hard, swinging his sword repeatedly. Everyone was deeply surprised by this training. The fairy said that he started training from the moment she started drawing the map, and it seems that he was a kobold, and also lived in the same academy as our hero. Lime smiled and realized that not everyone was doing well. As soon as our main character came to his room, he noticed a fairy on his bed, who wanted to show with all his appearance that she was an incredible beauty, and almost every man would like to lie down with her, to which the hero replied that he could accidentally pin her down. After a short time, a strange glow appeared around her, and in a second she turned into a beauty the size of our main character. Lime only asked her to calm down a little because he didn't want his younger sister to know about this, much less the goddess. The fairy thought that if he wanted to do that, then she would immediately go to bed. As soon as the fairy went to bed, Lime decided to check the results before going to bed. He looked at the map again and decided that tomorrow would be a hard day. The next day, all the students had breakfast in the cafeteria. Just like our protagonist, he even kept an eye on Letty, who continued to pay attention to him. He even thought a little about the upcoming tournament, which would be very soon. While he was thinking about it, the same guy from last night asked him to sit down. Our hero greeted him, after which they started a conversation. The boy wanted to talk about the tournament. What would happen? He heard that Lime applied there, but he couldn't say anything, because at the same moment he was approached by hooligans who started to get him. They started asking, because why kobold eating at the table like all other normal people? The kobold started to make excuses, but the hooligans wouldn't give him any words, saying that he was just... But Liam stepped in front of them, telling them he'd had enough. The guys noticed that he was a newbie, so they wanted to intimidate him. But of course our protagonist was not one of the timid 10 and immediately agreed to their adventure. The kobold couldn't believe that I was going to fight for him. So in a second I was on the battlefield, where the bully was already ready to blow off the head of his opponent. He swung his hand, but of course it didn't work, because the other party just held out his hand. Lime knew that he couldn't use magic on other students, so he grabbed the bully's arm and made him beg for mercy. As soon as he released it, he made it clear that anyone can have lunch in this dining room without exception. As soon as the high school student woke up a little, his friends told him that in front of him was a first-year student who had defeated a thunder dragon with his own hands. They decided that they would deal with him later. As soon as they ran away, the dog thanked our main character for saving him. But Lime only said that it was not necessary to take it all into your head. Cobalt also said that he applied for the magic tournament himself, but he knows that a weakling like him can't do anything. As soon as they started talking, Big Ears made it clear that he didn't even introduce himself. He said that his name was Buttercup Arcadi. This is all incredibly interesting for our main protagonist, but he did not say anything. In fact, Lime understood that this young man would become an incredible fighter in the future, who would deal with a multi-million-strong army alone and would be the strongest swordsman among his enemies. He would even be known as the Black Knight. They decided to say goodbye by this point, but Lime said he could offer to help you train at night. Buttercup couldn't believe it, because did our character see him at night? But if so, then of course he agreed. Lime at the same time had one condition. To be honest with him, he said that it seems that Ludwika's younger sister is the reincarnation of one of the 7 great divine demons and is currently serving in the Dark Temple. Buttercup couldn't figure out how he knew this, but our Lime just said that there were a lot of things being said about Buttercup's family. So at the same time he asked him to listen carefully. He told Tom to warn his sister that it was going to be dangerous soon, and he would need to stay home, so if he does as he says, then he can consider that he has redeemed his debt for the incident. Lime asked him to take it seriously enough, so they said their goodbyes afterward. As soon as our hero went far enough away, a fairy appeared, who realized that he was up to something again. Of course, he knew that this information would affect his life, because if he didn't do it, then he would become a killing machine because of his sister's death. But if his sister survived, then a deity would be reborn on the continent. A few days later, in the dead of night in the forest behind the Magic Academy, Lime continued to test his new powers, but Buttercup continued his hard training. At one point, he even started to get something right. Our hero said that we expect this result, because his friend trained for a long time to achieve this effect. Buttercup was also very pleased with himself, because all this was thanks to training with our protagonist. He even realized that now you can enchant your sword with magic. Buttercup, in turn, could not understand how our hero ended up in this flawed dorm, despite the fact that he was so strong. Lime was thanked for the kind words and also realized that tomorrow will be their last training session and the start of the tournament. He asked Buttercup if he was worried, because even in such a short time he achieved an incredible result. Our hero told him that his strength is determination. In addition, our protagonist said that Buttercup's true abilities were not fully revealed, because usually such abilities are developed due to an emotional shock, even though our character would like to avoid this for him. Because if this happens, he will gain incredible strength but simply lose his mind. Buttercup just laughed, to which our hero asked him not to take everything into his head, and also asked him to close his eyes. As soon as Buttercup closed his eyes, our Lime activated shadow analysis on him, with the help of which he noticed that Buttercup was actually being held back by some forces, like some iron chains, and did not allow all the dark forces to be released. It was as if he had grown up with such powers all his life. If these shackles were removed from his body, the strong boy's unbreakable strength would be unstoppable, and in the past, the death of his sister had been the trigger. As soon as he thought about it, Lime just reached out and stabbed Buttercup with his hand. Buttercup was caught, but after a second, this hand wasn't there at all. Buttercup just couldn't figure out what had happened. However, as soon as he looked around, he noticed that our protagonist was saying that it was time to leave. Then the action took place at the Colosseum, where the opening ceremony took place. The same girl who was sitting at the table came out. She was sure that many people were waiting for this moment. And then a strange shape appeared in the darkness. Our personage thought it looked like his ability, but after a little closer look, he realized that it was just an illusion. This illusion told all the students that they should prove today and show what they have achieved at the academy in a year. Lime knew that this man was the one who was hurting his village, so he had to win the tournament and then get rid of this bastard. As soon as the ceremony was over, our main character went out on the street, where he began to reflect that in total 128 students took part in the magic tournament. So in order to reach the final, you will need to win only 6 times, and all he will need is to give it his all. He wanted to see who he was fighting against, but then he felt a chill run through his body. It was Letty who had brought the two of them ice cream. She said she didn't want to scare him, she just wanted to support him. They started talking, but all that was clear was that Letty was surprised that our main character was allowed to participate in these competitions. She couldn't even believe that such a humble goblin as Lime wanted to participate there. Of course, our main protagonist said that everything was fine and continued to drink what they brought him. Letty realized that he was being too mysterious, so she decided that this was the right moment to return the favor, so she handed him a bag of chocolate. She immediately jumped up and asked not to take it personally because she was just paying off her debt, and then blushed completely. Lime said that he was very grateful for this, because this is the first time that someone gives him something other than his sister. After looking at the time, our goblin realized that it was about time to leave, as well as say goodbye to Letty. They bumped each other's fists together, so that in a second Letty was standing alone again, wondering what was happening to her, her heart pounding so fast. The first fight was a fight between a student who defeated a dragon, as well as Dragon Luda from the Lucifer dorm. All the girls supported Orphan because he had an unprecedented beauty, but the teachers themselves thought that it was suspicious to put students against each other like this. The inspector first wanted to give the weapon to our hero, but he refused. As soon as the examiner asked everyone to prepare and also asked them to start, Orphan took to the air with unprecedented speed and used the skill that all dragonmen possess. Lime thought it was simple, so he wanted to just dodge, but then he noticed that his legs were shackled. Orphan understood that you need to show your best every day, so it's fair to cheat. Of course, we can understand that someone helped Orphan, or rather, the third most powerful dragon people from the Breath of Flame Lena faction helped. She was a descendant of the forest dragon, so she could easily use such abilities. Orphan thought that he would cut his opponent in half, but Lime managed to draw his sword, which he got from the Thunder Dragon. Orphan did not believe in such an outcome, but in a second he was defeated in one blow. No one could believe it, but the old man noticed that the dark magic reserve of our main character is equal to the SSS level. Letty was very happy with this outcome, and the hall was just exploding. As soon as he went out to get some air, he noticed his sister, as well as the girl he had saved not so long ago. The fairy explained that they really wanted to see him, so that's why they came. They exchanged pleasantries, and then even handed our character a certain cake. Our Lime tried to remember the name of his new friend and remembered that the name was Mia. He said goodbye to the two and also thanked them for the pie. As soon as they finished, our protagonist was already in the waiting room, but as soon as he was already seated, a certain girl burst into the room saying that a disaster had happened to his friends. Lime immediately took off for the street, but only then realized that it was a trap, because his legs were shackled, and there was a dark energy behind him. He met the same Lud dragon that had helped Orphan during the competition, so he thought that the dragon would fight against him. But Dragon Lud only said that he realized that his magic was useless against Lime, so he asked everyone else to come out of hiding. They all said that they don't care about the rules, because now all the dragonmen will become our hero's opponent. Our character was silent for a long time. Everyone thought that he was speechless from fear, but the only thing he said was that there were 3 minutes left before the next fight, so he wanted to finish as quickly as possible. The Dragon Man was just furious. He wanted to burn Lime as quickly as possible, who was trying to figure out how to release as much dark energy as possible. And even thanks to this, he warmed up before the match. As he turned around, he saw that same Dragon Man turn into a fire salamander and try to activate its abilities. And not only he, absolutely everyone started to attack Lime, but they did not succeed. Each of their attacks just immediately parried. Not a single Dragon Man could believe it, because how dare he underestimate them so much. But even the Dragon Man, who had taken on an even larger form, immediately passed out with a few blows to the mouth. He realized that there was still one Dragon Man left, the one with its eyes closed. Lime approached him and asked him how much time was left until the next round. Dragon Man. I took out my watch and said 2 minutes and 30 seconds, which immediately calmed our character down. By that time, the second round of the tournament had begun. It was announced that our hero would fight again against the Dragon Man, but at the end of time, his opponent simply did not appear, which surprised everyone very much. The teachers couldn't believe it again, because how was this even possible? But the old man, Letty, and his sister were very happy. Lime also won the next 2 fights due to the fact that his opponents did not show up for the fight. This was not even surprising, because he had already managed to defeat all the opponents in the backyard, but still the opponent still came to the final battle. It was Buttercup. Our protagonist reviewed Buttercup's skills and noticed that Buttercup now had a Dark Knight class. Buttercup was glad that he could meet him in the final, to which Lime responded positively. However, Buttercup did something that no one could even imagine. He just raised his hands up and said that he was giving up. He explained this act by saying that our hero did for him, so I wanted to thank him for everything in the final fight. Lime in turn said that it wasn't fair, and if Buttercup wanted to thank him, then you could just fight a fair fight. Buttercup at the same time simply began to shine from such information and warned that he would not hold back. Our main protagonist, who clashed at the same time with his opponent, noticed that Buttercup's swordsmanship increased thousands of times after the last time, which was understandable, because the skills of the Dark Knight improved the characteristics of that to unprecedented heights. But the most interesting thing was that Buttercup hadn't even revealed his full strength. The entire rostrum watched this battle, everyone considered it an incredible sight. They exchanged an incredible amount of blows, but still at one point our character thought that he had caught Buttercup, but this time he dodged. He understood that the Dark Knight's skills were based on illusions and other things, but he still wanted to fight Buttercup on equal terms. So as soon as his opponent's sword fell out, he put his own away as well. At the same time, Buttercup thought that this was just another trick, but our protagonist assured him that he just wanted to fight on equal terms. Of course, as soon as they raised their fists, their fight was truly great. Both of them felt that they wanted to defeat each other. Our hero even began to notice that Buttercup began to gain his strength right during the duel with him, because he was still able to use the Dark Knight's highest skill, Time Stop. If everything continues at this rate, then our main character can accept defeat, so he also began to use his power. Buttercup was waiting for the moment, so at one point he took our character by the leg after the blow, but Buttercup also understood what it means to fight against an opponent with the illusion skills. A second later, Buttercup was just slammed into the wall, and Lime was the winner. After a short time, there was an award ceremony where the trophy was presented. Many teachers were not happy about this outcome, but only the old man remained unperturbed. He said that the king would soon come to Lime for an audience to receive the prize. Our main protagonist was about to leave, but the old man asked me to answer one of his questions. Who was standing in front of him? After all, the first-year student who won the magic tournament defeated the strongest students of their academy, and most likely he understood that they tried to kill him several times. The teachers were shocked, but the old man said that he would punish everyone who was involved in this. He deeply apologized for not stopping anything. However, Lime replied that he was fighting for victory, so there was nothing wrong with that. He asked the old man not to apologize. Of course, this streak after these words made it clear to our hero that he is a good character, although he does not really remember him in the game. The old man asked Lime what they were missing at the academy. Our character thought and turned all his memories around, and then said that discrimination is the main parasite of their academy, which shines through not only in teachers, but also in dormitories by rank. The old man said that he would take all necessary measures, but first he would dismiss 2 teachers. Our Lime went outside a few minutes later, where Buttercup was waiting for him. They started chatting cheerfully and carelessly, as well as discussing the tournament. But at one point Buttercup heard that our main character was asking him for something. Of course, Buttercup was happy to comply with any request from our character. So at this point, Lime said that he would soon leave this academy. Buttercup was shocked, but our protagonist only said that he had his own reasons for doing so, but only asked Buttercup to become his ally for the rest of his life. Dandelion couldn't understand what he was talking about, since they were already friends, but Lime asked him if he could call him a friend if King Dior and his entire entourage declared him an enemy. Buttercup still couldn't understand anything, but Lime once again asked him to promise it, so Buttercup just smiled and said that no matter what happens, he will always be on the side of our hero. As soon as they shook hands, our character did not miss the opportunity to praise Buttercup for his success. After that moment, as soon as our hero came out of the gate, he was met by his sister, Fairy, and Mia, who were all extremely happy about Lime's victory. It is at this point that we can notice that Letty was following our characters, although it would be worth clarifying that she was only following Lime. She couldn't understand because who were these children? But by that time, new abilities had already opened up for our protagonist, because he had completed another part of the prologue, and the fast movement skill was also opened. As soon as he returned to the village, everyone started running towards him at the same time. The head at the same time asked to see our main character at the village, which gradually began to develop. As soon as they sat down for a cup of tea, Lime began to ask why they even settled in a place where there is almost nothing. But the head only said that they had no choice, because they were persecuted from everywhere. The headmaster was about to say that he should look for a new place, but Lime said that he shouldn't, because he only recently realized that their village was cursed by someone. He had seen the seals that took the life out of their land. But the most important thing was that they weren't set up by a goblin. Even with such shocking news, he promised that he would destroy them. He realized that he was going to destroy the largest seal, which was located directly above the center of the village, because he understood that these seals simply prevent those from living. He even said that whoever did this would definitely pay for it. As soon as the seal was broken, he informed the headman that everything would be fine in the future, which was exactly what happened. Many children in the village wanted to have a feast where all the food was incredible. He even thought that the goddess was happy to see such a sight. The next morning, Lime was woken up by the fact that his sisters came to his room, but our hero should have already returned to the academy. The sisters were a little upset, But our character decided to cheer them up, that only thanks to their care, he was able to fully relax. The girls decided that this was the moment when they could give him what they had done together, or rather a bracelet that our Lime should have liked. As soon as he enjoyed this gift, he went to the window, where he was met by a fairy. She was very worried about what would happen very soon, to which Liam replied that everything would be fine, because he would have a plan to defeat the king, because he knew everything about him. The fairy immediately thought about it and couldn't figure out if our protagonist was really a goblin, to which he replied that it was true. At this point, we can see the castle of King Dior, who thought everything was very interesting. As long as the fairy was around Lime, Lime thought it was time to use the skill, which I recently received, or rather a quick move. As soon as he opened his status window, he clicked on the special letters and immediately found himself in his dorm. Of course, this skill was common in the game, but definitely not in his new world. He wanted to continue wondering even more, but it was already time to leave. We see Dior's castle again, as well as our character approaching. The knight asked him to leave, but as soon as Lime showed the scroll with the fact that he had permission, the knight immediately let him pass. As soon as he got inside, he started looking at the castle. The fairy noticed this, but Lime only said that he wanted a little distraction. Our main character was approached by a butler who wanted to show Lime to his room. Our protagonist asked the fairy about one favor at that moment, and he asked her to get out if something went wrong. By that time, a certain person also came to the castle gate. He said that he wanted to bring our main character a gift that he forgot, which means that the knight missed that person. Of course, by that time Lime was already in the hall, which in the game was a battlefield, and then he met the king against whom he fought in the game. Our main character started introducing himself, and the king just asked if he was a goblin. Our hero confirmed all this, to which the king said that he did not know that goblins have such power. Did he really master the dark forces himself? Of course, the king said that according to the rules of the tournament, he must give our main protagonist one of the treasures for winning. In front of Lime was a cursed sword, erendite, a powerful shield, demonic wing, magic armor, chains of Hades. Of course, all these items in the game were very high class, and you could only knock them out with a small chance, so what did our hero need to choose? He chose a sword, so the king asked him to come to him and collect the reward. As soon as Lime came up, the king told him that once Lime became king, he asked a servant to buy him a stone that shows the intentions of people entering the throne room. So as soon as it turns red, it means that the person has bad intentions. Our character noticed that the stone was just burning red, so at the same time he was attacked by the king. He realized that he was trapped again. Of course, the king liked that his opponent at that time was able to dodge such a blow, but still did not fight personally. He called all his servants. The king asked him to stand still and beg for mercy, but for this the punishment will be worse than death. Lime in turn replied that he was not going to do this, because he had come there for the king's head. He even said that after the death of the king, all this territory will belong only to our character. The king couldn't believe it, so he grinned. Our main character, in turn, immediately went into battle against all the minions of the king and asked the fairy to cure him. She tried, but it didn't work. So our main protagonist replied that it was because of the bleed effect that the sword casts. Of course, all the comparisons of our main character were from the game. But even at this moment, it was clear that in the game against this boss, huge groups were collected, so to get to the king, he had to first get even with all the monsters. He thought that even though he was alone, he was still as strong as an entire squad. Many people tried to hurt him, but they did not succeed because in all cases, Lime used anything as effectively as possible. The king could not believe his eyes, because his entire army could not cope. It did not even strike at our character. The king tried to keep a good spirit. He said that it would definitely not work to run away forever. The king noticed that something was wrong with our protagonist, to which Lime replied that it was just that the battle was nearing its end. The king felt that this was a compliment to his abilities. He said that everything that our character said was true, because soon the goblin will be killed. But at the same time, we can understand that all the movements that were on the battlefield were thought out by our hero to the smallest detail, because finally he drew a pentagram that allowed him to use the skill Goblin Kinship. It was at this moment that the Goblin King appeared. Dior thought it was funny because how could one goblin stand up to an entire army? But Lime just smiled and said that this was the king, which meant that the king would have servants. The Goblin King raised his staff, and goblin after goblin began to appear. It was at this moment that the real bloody battle of the army against the army began. In this army, there was only one advantage, the number. All of the enemy were quickly being slaughtered by the goblins, and Dior couldn't believe it. As soon as the army was gone, the Goblin King disappeared, and our protagonist suggested starting the second round. Dior was absolutely furious, so at the same time he started to release it. Our character noticed that the king is not so simple, which means that this is just something that you need to show yourself in full. Of course, the fairy wanted to stop him, because he still hadn't gotten rid of the bleeding that was inflicted by the sword. But even that couldn't be done. The king tried to attack again, but our hero tried to block this blow. The king pinned Lime to the ground and then tried to burn him, and then did a certain trick that made it clear to our protagonist that the king was now unusual, because now he had 4 hands. While Lime was thinking, he fell into another trap and was still alive. Of course, he realized that at this moment he had no strength left. The king began his attack again, each blow of which was lead-free, but very exhausting. Constantly the king laughed, because he thought that the victory was his. However, the king stopped for a second and said that in honor of the fact that a beautiful warrior was standing in front of him, he was using a forbidden technique that our protagonist knew for sure. This technique was called Satan's Ball. Of course, Lime didn't think he could withstand the onslaught of this ability in this state. He decided that he needed to finish everything in one hit, but then he realized that he simply couldn't do anything. Of course, the king was having fun. He felt his superiority, but at the same time, a well-known princess appeared, who said that they didn't have time, who said that if Lime didn't have dark magic in her, then she would show what dark elves were really capable of. She used elf absorption. Of course, our protagonist's powers have been restored, but the princess just turned off and said that now everything depends on our character. He, as soon as he caught it, noticed that he was giving it all his strength, that even his injuries were healed, so the only thing left for him to do was finish it off. He would defeat the king with just a single charge. So at this moment, while he was rejoicing in his victory, that charge just skewered him through and through. The only thing that our main character said to his enemy was that he was stronger than in the game. That's how this video ends. If you have sat through to the end, please don't forget to press the subscribe button and leave feedback. See you in the next video.